Define masculinity. Do you think you're masculine? You have this aura of masculinity. What is it? I always thought this was a strange thing. Why is everyone trying to pigeonhole masculinity or ask me to define it, which I probably couldn't do anyway?
Tell me, who is David Gandy?
I think it depends who you ask.
Becoming a male supermodel. I believe the only male supermodel.
No, there are a few, but
Well, let's keep it. That's how
would be
a number
very
of people
nice,
have said.
but
I
yeah.
believe, and that's the perception.
And we orchestrated a meeting with Dolce. Tandy orchestrated for me to be at a birthday party where they were, and she faked an airline ticket that I had to pick up just to get me at this party. 3 weeks later, I was booked for the campaign. Heidi, my agent, called me up and said, right, we're negotiating on something big with Dolce.
It feels like in more recent years you've been able to bring a lot more of the things that are important to you. And I think I'll bring the CSJ, the Centre for Social Justice, into the conversation quite early. It's how we've connected.
And there was a big lever to switch off social media around the world. I wouldn't even hesitate within 10 seconds to go and pull that lever over there and pull off. And I think you'd see a massive difference in everything. I've said it for many, many years, and been finding children should not be on social media. Do need some authority. I think they do need probably role models. I was taught how to be. I always say, forget masculinity, which is about being a gentleman.
David Gandy, welcome.
Thank you.
This is a conversation I've been really looking forward to.
Good, me too.
Tell me, who is David Gandy?
Oh wow, that's a big question. I think it depends who you ask. It's, the weird thing is, not to sound kind of too big-headed, but there's not two sides. But the way I change something, the way I very differentiated in the modelling industry is building a brand. So there's a David Gandy brand. So often I talk about this, talk about the David Gandy in third person, which makes me sound like a proper twat sometimes, but I kind of have to because I'm thinking of the brand. And then there's me, there's David Gandy, the person who is just predominantly dad at the moment. That's what it's been now for like 7 years. And I don't think my children even particularly know what I do. I mean, if they asked them, they said, I think Daddy makes clothes. And they see me on television and billboards and stuff like this, but I haven't really incorporated them within that. To them, it's like, yeah, Dad's on TV this morning. That's just quite normal, but they still, I'm just the one fun dad.
I love that. Fun dad.
Or strict
Who doesn't want to be that? Has there been a moment there where your kids have spotted you in something and you've actually had to explain it then? Because there's quite a lot of public-facing images, if you like, of you.
Yeah, I mean, they go, Daddy, is that you? And I go, yeah. And they've come to a couple of photo shoots, so they understand what I do.
Yes.
To a very small extent, and those shoots are all my friends, they're all my team. It's just a really lovely fun day for them, really. They're not really experiencing much else. They don't see the day to day. But it is, I suppose it becomes a norm when you don't know when someone else isn't on television. They just go, oh, Daddy's on television this morning, or we're going to watch it. And or they open a magazine and there I am. They go, yeah, that's fine. Yeah. It's just, that's what he does. There's not any difference about it. They don't probably quite understand how other people perceive it in some ways, or being in the public eye, or fame, or any of those things. They've kept them quite away from it. They're still young. I mean, Matilda's just 7 at the moment, so she's beginning to understand a little bit more.
We've got 2 daughters having that chat offline, weren't we? And I'm a little bit ahead of you. I've got the hormones raging, and I've got the all the stuff you're going to be coming into and navigate. 14 and 16-year-old girls right now. The personal brand bit, the kind of David Gandy front-facing public, and then the fun dad. But how have they entwined perhaps more recently? I would imagine earlier in your career it was very much a professional portrayal perception. It feels like in more recent years you've been able to bring a lot more of the things that are important to you. And I think I'll bring the CSJ, the Centre for Social Justice, into the conversation quite early. That's how we've connected. Where you're able to talk about things that matter to you, that you want to in any way raise awareness for and so on. But at the same time, actually, that's come into your work as well, if you like.
I mean, yes. I mean, the CSJ. I mean, first of all, even before the girls came along, I was talking about men's suicide, and seeing a massive problem with young men. When I say young men, the statistic is still going up. It's the biggest killer. It used to be men of under 40, then it was 45 now. I understand it's the biggest killer of men under 50. I mean, it's something I always wanted to to talk about, and
no one was, right?
Aware.
There was no one from a role model point of view. There was no one.
No, I mean, it was around the same time Movember started as well. I still don't really think there was a time that it was getting a bit of traction. It all seems to be a little bit forgotten about again. Still, I don't think there was a solution to it. I think that there is some solutions to help, and I think that's going to become even worse because we do have a problem with men's identity. When I'm doing interviews now, the reason I started working with the CSJ about the lost boys, this generation 16 to 24-year-olds, is because everyone was asking me suddenly to define masculinity. I've been doing interviews for 20 years, and suddenly in the last 25 years, I'm like, define masculinity. Do you think you're masculine? You have this aura of masculinity. What is it? I always thought this was a strange thing. Why is everyone trying to pigeonhole masculinity or ask me to define it, which I probably couldn't do anyway? So it was it's an interesting conversation to have, and I think it opens up a lot of conversations that people should be having with young men and their daughters. I think growing up with a different role model with my father, my grandfather, we are the first, I'm probably talking about, we're probably the first generation that have to balance that work, probably main breadwinner, and also much more involved in your children's lives. Now, I'm not saying my father wasn't, but there wasn't the cooking, looking after children, school time, shopping, everything else. And I think we are the first generation of fathers to have to engulf that much more and combine it. So things are changing. Those roles are different, and and then bringing sort of my daughters into role as well, where it was sort of funny that when everyone's buying presents for my daughter, they bought books, and it was about the brilliant women in the world and how women have changed the world and everything, and which I'm absolutely all for, to say what you can change, but it wasn't a book about the people who have changed the world, it was about the women who have changed the world, and I have to explain to them as well about the men that have changed the world and the men that are making a difference. And it's people, not women and men. We can all be great. We're still trying to break this journey up into, we're all trying to be equality, but we're still, trying to pigeonhole those two, sort of where people are in that. And the same with my partner as well, where we're with Steph. It's it's like automatically, like, were you staying at home, or is she going to work, or is she staying at work, or you going? I said, no, my wife's a barrister. I have all my work I have to do, and we work as a partnership. There's no set roles at all. So
that partnership's key, isn't it? And I think you mentioned role model. You mentioned your grandfather, and the fact that we are both present dads. One of the most damning and concerning stats and kind of data that came out of the Lost Boys report for me was the lack of sort of kids growing up without a father, if you like, and a father figure that becomes a role model. Do you think that, because that feels to me where this crisis of identity, and then the fact that these young lads are looking for role models that they find on social media, and of course somehow they manage to find potentially the wrong ones, is that where the real crisis lies?
Not the CSJ will say that I do think your mum and dad and male role models are important. I think my role model within the fashion industry is a woman called Tandy Anderson. It's not a man whatsoever, because when I came into the industry and did what we did, there wasn't finally a man who had done, hopefully hadn't done what I had done before, wanted to achieve. The head of my agency, Tandy Anderson, was the one who believed in me. Was the one when I came out in sort of 2005, came out to say, look, I don't want to keep doing this commercial work and this catalogue work. It's not what I'm in the industry to do. And everyone thought I was mad by saying that. But she said, absolutely, this is what we've got to do. I believe in, but you have to listen to me. And I listened to her and still listen to her to this day.
What a beautiful relationship, proper mentor. Proper
mentor, absolutely. And if there's, to this day I'm making a decision, of course I speak to my parents, my dad. As you get older, those decisions have to be made on your own. But if it's sometimes something to do with fashion, where I'm not quite sure, I need a bit of reassurance or just a voice, I call Tandy. That's my person. So it's not, I think women have just as big a role as men. we're saying about the men have to be role models, they have to be more present. Our fathers weren't. We are more present, so why are we seeing this shift?
Yes.
That doesn't quite correlate, if you're my understanding, before. I think this idea of soft parenting is a massive problem. I don't quite believe in the soft parenting ideal. I am probably a strict father in some ways, but I think there's a fine balance. I also don't think one child can be brought up the same way as another one. But boys, and the way you bring up boys and girls is different. And I think boys do need some authority. I think they do need probably role models. I was taught how to be. I always say, forget masculinity and the way you're brought up about masculinity or toxic masculinity we're using too much is about being a gentleman. That's the way I've kind of been brought up, and I think that's something that's been lost as well. But the story I always given, and you have to follow me with this one because it sounds a bit weird, but when we were once in Botswana, they were telling us about this, the elephant herds, and one part they were doing very, very well. Good elephants, they were being bred and all well, and they had like the bull elephants and then other parts they didn't. So they took a lot of the bull elephants to go and breed in this other area to build up a successful herd of elephants and over on this side. And what they forgot was they left should we call them the teenage boy adolescent that were all coming into, not being able to sort of mate yet, but so had lots of hormones, angry, and they were destroying farms. They were killing other animals, rhinos, farmers, other elephants, because they didn't have anyone to put them in their place to teach them.
No matriarch.
They brought back the bull elephants, and everything was normal again. So it was just, and they was, and that's I think a good analogy for where we are here. That it still needs some guidance,
yes.
And being a little bit tougher, and a little bit harder with boys, and I think they appreciate that. I know I certainly did. I certainly didn't like some of my teachers at school. My rugby teacher, and they were hard. They were strict. But going back now, who was the guys that we had a beer with at the end of A levels? It was those two teachers, because we saw another side of them, and you realised actually how important they were in our lives.
It brings almost the kind of the woke element, if you like, which the older generation really struggle with. What they see as a generation coming through now, where there's an expectancy. And I think we talked about this briefly before we started filming, where someone might turn to you and say, how do I get to where you are? And it's graft, it's hard work, it's not always enjoyable.
No.
And I don't want to keep referencing social media, but there is an element of portrayal, if you like, of success, where this was me last year, this was my crappy car, this was my little flat, now look at me with my Lamborghini and so on, and I've done it all in a year. And that could be just to sell a course. Which of course, there may not be a lot of truth in that, but the point is, the messaging is actually try and get there quick.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to be said about building that resilience piece that can come from, my dad was strict on me, and it wasn't always fun. But I think that he very much viewed, and there was a military background there from his dad being a brigadier. Yeah. An element of actually my job, if you like, is to build you for life. And it's not always going to be friendship. And I have a much softer kind of relationship with my kids, but there's still plenty of don't do this and need to do that and this is right. Whereas there are certain parenting scenarios that are just totally hands off, and almost it's like leave it to school. And that's pretty dangerous, right? It
is, and I appreciate sometimes with when people say, what are you most proud of in like the last few years, or wherever you think you've got it right with my children. My children can sit down in we've been away while I've been working, and they have to actually come to lunches or dinners with clients and everything else. And people have been astounded. It keeps on saying, your children are so well behaved. Now, they haven't seen it when we left that dinner, and then it's complete chaos. But from those dinners, my children converse with adults. They have a conversation. And it's also, they said they're not on iPads. All we see now are kids on iPads in restaurants. I say, yeah, we don't have iPads. We take drawings. We take, and I'll be there drawing with them at the table and colouring in and whatever other sort of little playthings they have. And I think that's important. My daughter the other day chose I was going out into the garden, because now I'm in the age of gardening, of cutting my hydrangeas down. My kids were, we were at classes, it was a weekend. They chose from not watching, not being on a game on their iPad or watching TV. They said, "Can we come and help? We love helping you, because you always encourage us to come and help in the garden." So they got their gardening gloves on, and now we're all out in the garden. And they chose that over sitting indoors. And that's I'm quite a father who's always like, let's get out and do something. Which I think is important. And if my children, I'm quite strict with anything on their iPads, they get an hour one day, and when the time's out, they go, "Daddy, time's up." I'm like, we didn't regulate that very well. Like, you have to maybe have 10 minutes and then 10 minutes, and they're understanding this. Or when it's out, they know not to argue. I say, well, okay, well, that's time out. Go and find something to do. And it's important to also say to them, you go and find something important to do, or something fun to do. And they're building dens and they're playing together, and they're always, well, can we take the dog for a walk? Can we do? I'm like, yeah, we can. And being present as a parent is when you say being present as a parent, that's different, I think, in these days, because what I'm seeing, and we can all be guilty of it, is being with our children, but on our phones. So everyone is on their phones, and there's a massive difference. And we all know how guilty we can be of being on Instagram or something else, and half an hour goes by, and what actually have you been looking at for that half an hour? And that's not time with your children. So we are all guilty of it.
Yeah.
I'm not blaming anyone, but we have to be just about, and don't have your phone there, put it over the other side of the room, and you won't keep looking at it. They are addictive. They're addictive for adults, they're addictive for children.
They're designed to be, right?
They're designed to be. And I can't argue, listen, I'm a person that very much was a disruptor within the male fashion industry, and chose to, very different ways of doing something, and aiming for things that other guys hadn't done before. So I can't look at sort of social media and people saying, do I need to work hard? Because I'm seeing these influencers who are flown by brands to all around the world, paid to be there, and all I have to do is take a couple of videos and post it, and I'm paid to do that. How can you argue against that? Would you want to say, well, no, you have to pay for that yourself, and you have to work solidly for 5-10 years, and then you can afford that, and then you can post it. That's a very hard sell. And people are, and we are now seeing, if I'm understanding right, that people are aspiring to be influencers.
Yes. I think it's actually the number one choice of teenagers as a career now. And it'll be because of what's portrayed on social media. And I think something that I'd love to open up with you about the graft, the effort that you put in to get to where you are. And I'll make you smile now, but by being born a very handsome man, and being able to then, in context of working on yourself, I want to know the understanding you went through of, you used the word gentleman earlier, which I'm really glad you did, because that's how other people that I know that know you describe you. Nice. And I can have fun with the handsome bit, and that's clearly been a big part of your career, becoming a male supermodel. I believe the only male supermodel.
No, there are a few, but
let's keep it. That's how I know other people have said. I believe, and that's the perception. It's another word you've used as well. The perception is, I think he's the only male supermodel, which is a really kind of credit to you and how you built that brand. But I know, without knowing the details, that you've worked really hard to get there. And so I want to understand that behavioural element. There's looking good, but there's also knowing how to behave. There's a sort of behaviour, if you like, that's gone into how you've got work, how you've created opportunities for yourself, which is so much more than just being a pretty face. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, that's, I can't, as I said, we're coming into my 25th year into this industry. And first of all, you don't know anything. I didn't know anything about the fashion industry. I didn't aspire to come into it. So again, I was very much relying on my agency and Tandy Anderson, as I talked about. And at that time, first 3 years were tough, but I had good commercial work, good commercial clients, mostly catalogue, being, pretty decent money. But anything I do, I always think I want to be the best at it. So, my aspiration was I always wanted to, I grew up with like the Levi's guys, the Levi's commercials, the famous ones. I'm like, I want to be that guy. That's what I want to be doing. I want a fragrance, I want all these different things. So it was just, I suppose, wanting more and determination to get there. And that's why I said to Tandy that this is what I want to do. And I've said it a million times in stories, but she said, okay, you have to give up everything that every client, because you can't be seen as commercial. We've got to go back to editorial, and we've got to get a break somewhere. And I think I know where the break is. I think it's with Dolce. And everyone always said, you're Armani, you're Armani, you're Armani. And Tandy Anderson went, you're Dolce & Gabbana, you're Dolce & Gabbana. And we orchestrated a meeting with Dolce. Now I had worked with Dolce a little bit on shows, but that was it. And this was 5 years later. Tandy orchestrated for me to be at a birthday party where they were. And she faked a airline ticket that I had to pick up just to get me at this party. And that's what I did. I walked there, and Dominica and Stefano were there. And they said, David, obviously I looked a bit different, that 5-year change. And they went, okay. 3 weeks later, I was booked for the campaign. Did the campaign. I was doing a show in Milan. Heidi, my agent, called me up and said, right, we're negotiating on something big with Dolce. And that was Light Blue.
Yeah, look where that went.
Doing for 8 years, which I.
So in context, you kind of manifested that. That conversation with Tandy, it was like, this is where I want to go. Mm-hmm. This is where I want to be. She's someone that then can make that happen. Can we bring confidence into the conversation now? Because I've heard you talk previously that you were a relatively shy young lad. Yeah. To then go on and do what you've done, you've ultimately been very public facing, and there's eyes on you, there's cameras everywhere. And a lot of people, myself included, could be like, oh, that's intimidating. Was the purpose and that visualization of what you want to achieve almost like what overrode the confidence? Does that make sense? Because you've got to want something, haven't you? And then you can get past what could be seen as self-conscious and imposter syndrome. Was the drive to make it happen? It
was the drive, definitely. And I think there's the confidence side. I don't think I was, and I can't really, I have to say whether I've looked at this, I don't think I was a confident child. I don't think I was a confident model when I first went in. But I knew what I wanted, and I knew there was a way of getting there. So I can go back to sort of playing sport at school. I knew I probably wasn't the most confident footballer or rugby player or cricket. I was quite confident at cricket at a later level. But I had the confidence in myself, not probably in football, but in rugby and cricket, that I could change a game. I mean, I could see a game, I always see, I saw something differently in cricket and rugby that I was like, we can move this, we can change positions, I know. So I think that was my difference of reading a game rather than being, the biggest one on the rugby field or the best cricket player. I was a fast bowler, but then I would just analyse, and I realised I was captain of a couple of teams, so I was like, just give the ball to me, I'd be like, we need to get a couple of wickets in. I could go in and get a couple of wickets. And I quite didn't realise that at the time, but until I was older, I thought, I could actually do that. Yeah. Which is quite weird. So I was confident in myself, but afterwards and before, I wouldn't, you wouldn't know I had any confidence kind of whatsoever. So confidence is something different, of belief. And that was why I sort of came into the industry, with the fashion industry, and just looked at what the men had achieved. We had the female supermodels, none of them that you needed to even name their surname. You had Kate, Naomi, and Christy, all those different. And I was like, well, how did you get there? And everyone said, you're crazy, you're not going to get there. Like that's for women, you're never going to get to that level. Until we're on the closing ceremony of the Olympic Games, and there's Naomi and Kate and a few others, and then there's me, the sort of solitary male model.
Again, there's a real visualization to that. I think that's really inspiring. That's what I'm trying to say to you. I think there's a real core message there. Right? Actually, this is where I want to be. And one way or another, and having the right people around you as well. Clearly, you've named
the right people and having a plan to. Some people don't work on plans. Brands don't really work on strategy or plans these days. It's very odd to me. I will always say where I want to be. Don't have to say it to someone. Will have in my head what I want to achieve. So when we did sort of Light Blue, it was then after that, well, where do we go from here? Well, we kind of want to. We had to build the name. We had to know that it was David Gandy, not the guy in the Dolce commercial in the white swim shorts. We had to build that name up outside of the fashion industry, and that platform gave me to be able to do that. And then of course we did the Soul underwear campaign with Dolce. That's something I wanted to do. Then other opportunities like the David Gandy book came up with Dolce, and then I realised it was going into brands. It was more being ambassadorial role and going into brands that weren't as big as Dolce. But I saw the opportunity of bigger rates, exclusive rates, building those brands up, those brands getting sold. And yeah, it was something different I was doing as well to other guys. Then realizing, I want a collaboration with a brand, which M&S. We went into M&S and we did for 6 years. We did 90 million quid of sales. And again, there wasn't a guy collaborating with brands at that time. They were modeling for brands. There were celebrities, actors, footballers all acting, but none of them had this collaboration.
Yeah.
And I did. So yeah, it's I always say there's got to be a goal, because otherwise, where are you aiming for? I always say life's a game of chess, and clearly there's the checkmate at the end. But how are you getting there?
Yes.
And constantly people putting things in the way, or your things being taken away, and you're still diverting, to get to the end goal.
I love that.
It may take a bit longer, it may take a bit shorter.
Yes.
There's other things open. I mean, some things that you start to go on, and then something else comes along and you divert and you go somewhere else, and then actually think, oh yeah, that was where I was going here. That's what I wanted to do.
But that's staying present with it. I feel like you've got that. And again, you're checking in with yourself all the time and not letting, whether it's money or perhaps something that's not true to your purpose and what fulfills you, if you like. And another thing that's very consistent is staying in good shape. It's part of you being able to look as good as you can. And ultimately, that's what you want to do in that side of the profession, if you like. And I'm interested to know how that's evolved for you from a young David to sitting now still in really good shape. What are you doing, both physically and mentally, to keep fit?
Well, I was a chubby teenager. No for any reason of bad eating or not exercise or anything else. It's just the way I grew up. I grew slightly out, and then I think I hit 17 one day and I got out of bed and I was just over 6'2", and then I was quite, not gangly, but you're that awkward stage. You're not really a man, you're not really a boy, there's nothing on you. But I still had quite a big frame. But I was always training, so I was, when I couldn't then play sport, and I was starting university and I wasn't playing team sport as much, I then got into training. I then got into the gym. I'm teaching myself that. So everyone kind of thinks it was, I hated being skinny. I always wanted to be bigger. And it was probably, I remember playing rugby I went to Gloucestershire University for a while, and getting smashed around the park. There were all the Gloucester boys and Welsh boys and Cheltenham boys. I was, from Billericay in Essex, and suddenly that level went up. Sure. And it's when you have to be realistic. You go, okay, I'm not part of this. I can't be. I'm just not good enough, or I'm not big enough. So there was that will to sort of get in the gym, and I did it for myself. It was how I feel more comfortable. So going into the fashion industry, it wasn't suited for the fashion industry at all. I mean, I can still say a shoot I did last week, and they gave me a load of Dior clothing, put them on, doesn't fit. Still to the same day, it doesn't. I don't fit sample sizes, and they used to call me the big guy. They're coming, and I wasn't a big guy, where I was a 40 chest and a 32 waist. It's not big, but it's bigger in fashion during that time. So of course you go from that, when none of the clothes are fitting you, to the point of, okay, now we've got David Gandy. The clothes will be made for him, and there's how the roles change. Yeah. You suddenly had a bit more respect within the industry, and they were choosing you to be part of their campaign because of who you were, and they were changing everything to suit you, which is a nice position suddenly to be in. You felt like you had a bit of control there. Yeah. And that was one of my biggest things. I never wanted to be controlled by the industry. I wanted to be in control. So there's always elements of, but mindsets of people. I think you were talking about younger generations now, is the idea of having to, when something goes wrong, dust yourself off, not lose determination and keep on going. I think there was once when Ralph Lauren, I still hadn't done Dolce, Ralph Lauren booked me on a shoot. I literally had a bag packed walking out the door. It was going to be my first biggest ever job ever. Agent called up and Heidi said, yeah, David, they've cancelled you. They were last minute, everything's cancelled. And that was one point I went, I'm not sure how long I can keep doing this. But again, next day, brushed myself off and carried on. And I've actually just shot the Ralph campaign last year. So it's taken me 23 years to get Ralph, but I finally got it. Yeah.
Whereas others in that moment could have actually, that could have been a defining moment where David Gandy, as we know it, wouldn't have happened, and you'd have gone off and done something else. The resilience piece.
The resilience piece. I also think that I'm not having, I've always said, don't believe your own hype. That's one of the biggest things. And a lot of the guys, which I saw them make mistakes. So there was a core, a lot of guys during my time who I looked up and thought, God, you're, doing so well within the industry, but they all believed their own hype. They all became quite big-headed. And I was on one job with Gandy, and I was working the same as this really big model. And he was on the phone. He was late. He turned up on the phone. He was on the phone all the time. He turned up late the next day. I carried on doing Gandy for many years. He never got offered back. So I saw instantly that, you know, you're never too big. And that's why I've always, you know, on a set, I don't think we don't have a big entourage. I don't have a big team. Often on my own. You're always on your own pretty much the whole time. And you know, I'm still talking to everyone on set. You know, I probably have more in common what I think with the guy behind the camera, or you know, the guy who's brought the car for the prop, than the very famous person I'm shooting with.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a difference.
But there's a relatability there, isn't there? And also that actually helps you, because you've got a team there that in any way feel they can share with you how to make something better. And you in any way will ask questions, because you're clearly a naturally curious person. You know, I say that because the observational piece, like noticing those lads that were doing very well but were up themselves, you know, were believing their own hype. There's an intelligence. That's probably the word.
Well, I think inquisitive is good. You know, I always like you know, when we're going back to my daughters, and she said, Matilda is so inquisitive. She has to know how something works. She has to know how everything works or has its place, or animals and all those difference. And as soon as someone says that to me, the child's inquisitive, academia doesn't mean as much to me as probably a lot of people do. But inquisitive side, asking people, not talking about yourself. Matilda doesn't talk, and I don't. I think what I do is probably quite boring for other people, so they expect, but other people, I can sit there and they will just talk about, and it's happened a lot over the last few years, is talking about themselves, what they have achieved, what they are doing, how important they are, the watch they've got on that gives them that, you know, that, and I sit there and, yeah, that's really interesting. I carry on asking questions.
I'm smiling, beaming, because I have a particularly one daughter that is super inquisitive and curious, cannot stop asking questions, loves animals, has a horse.
Yeah.
And I'd like to think, and I think we can power this, that that's come from, you know, what she's seen and learnt and heard from how I go about stuff. You know? In the same way, it's a pleasure to be able to ask you questions and learn right now, despite the fact that it's all you know. I'm learning so much now, and I crave that, because that's growth, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're in definitely. I mean, we are heading towards a very different time. We're being in the fashion industry, where, you know, we were taking camera, you know, film camera. You know, we had business to roll the films. They went off to the lab. We never saw it. To then that sort of, whether you call it progression or not, but into digital, seeing it on screen. That changed the industry, because then a lot of the brand, the marketing department, everyone was there making decisions instantly.
Yeah, of course.
To the point now of then social media. Then that changed from people spending money so much on amazing creative big campaigns to just putting, you know, it's all about your social numbers. And I feel very sorry for a lot of the younger models coming in, because they haven't got those numbers. And it's not based on merit of casting someone like you would maybe for a film on the best role. It's cast a lot of the time on, they have, you know, 200,000 followers, they're going to be better for us, which I don't believe in whatsoever.
Such a competitive place now as well to build a following.
It's such a competitive place. Really and AI is, you know, I've talked about AI, how we have, you know, I talked about the Ralph or the M&S I've just shot. There's 40 people on set. When I say 40 people, there's DPs and photographers and assistants and stylists, makeup artists, chef, car drivers. So many people are employed with this one shoot. And now you've got brands who are bringing AI, which of course is one or two people maybe on a computer, and scraping people's images off that isn't regulated to create what they want on screen, if they haven't bought people's image or licensed them. So I've been talking about that as well. I think it's a major talking point, especially with the government, who because they want more tax, but they seem to be not realizing that within this industry, and I think within a lot of industries, AI is going to make a lot of people redundant, because I can see from those 40 people, if you take 2 people on the screen, you're making 38 people redundant. And what are we also, the other side of what are we showing to our children? You know, a lot of my career has been based on, are you providing an image that is not attainable? And I always argue against that, or a body image that's not attainable. And I say, it is attainable. If you want to be in the gym every day and you want to do it for 25 years, then yes, it is attainable. And it's hard work. But what are we now showing our children that we're saying, don't be on social, try not to be on social? And we will speak about probably that in a minute. But now look at campaigns and look at films and look at imagery, and that doesn't even exist. It's that person doesn't exist. That clothing doesn't exist at the moment. It's all created by a computer. So you're talking at the moment about that's a massive, massive change. And we, as parents and within this industry, have to learn. We have to, this is something we have to change all the time.
Yeah. You mentioned we'll talk about it in a minute. Let's talk about that now. We were talking about social media earlier and how it's probably the biggest conversation in our household to do with how we're managing it, the addictive algorithms, managing the kids, and then our social group. Like, you get together for a minute. It's like, how do you manage your kids with their phones and so on? So, opening that up in terms of also then how that's flipping into the young kids, both boys and girls, and what they see as role models and so on. What would you do if you had that kind of say, if you like, I'll put you almost in a sort of government position? What would you bring in from what you see in?
Well, I jokingly say if there was a big lever to switch off social media around the world, I wouldn't even hesitate within 10 seconds to go and pull that lever over there and put it all off. And I think you'd see a massive difference in everything. I think you would see a huge shift in our children's behaviour. I think you see a huge shift in partnerships, in marriages. We're just not present with each other.
Present, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, I've said it for many, many years. I've been finding children should not be on social media. And finally, I think it's getting a little bit of traction. I think countries, Australia, I think Spain are doing it, I think Denmark are saying, for under 16s. I would argue I would do it for under 18s. It's an addictive, an addictive, whatever you call it, problem, along with alcohol and cigarettes and drugs. That's how addictive they are. If you actually look at what it does to the brain.
That's right. And a lot of that information, the awareness isn't raised enough yet, is it? And then you've got the challenges where one parent might be allowing their kids to use it at a certain age, which means the leverage for that kid. So, well, these kids use it, so why can't I? And then there's the peer pressure on the parents.
Of course, we've had this conversation. You're at a different point. Yeah. And I'm hoping by the time I get to where you are, 14, 16, the government have done something about it, and we've banned it.
You're not alone in saying that to me. Quite a few people that I know that are behind us are really hoping, because it will almost help them to be able to say, look, this is for a good reason.
Absolutely, and you're right about the peer pressure, unless all the parents. Yeah. I said to you this morning off camera, I had a reading day with my daughter, and one of the boys came up to me, and of course there's influences coming up. My daughter has never Googled me. She doesn't have access to Google. One of the boys came up to me and, I Googled you. So you're famous, I Googled you. And I saw this, and I saw this, and I saw this. And I said, that's what I do. And he brought up a couple of other things that he saw me doing. And all I could think was, is you shouldn't be on Google. That's what have you got access to Google for? My children don't know what it is.
You've done really well to manage that. But they are at an age where we how it is coming through for other people in your position, we were probably still relatively early. I remember being in restaurants and hotels where we would be talking and we'd be playing Uno, and the tables around us, the iPads were starting to pop up, and we're thinking, that doesn't look right. No. And for that very reason, you said, our kids, it's the best compliment I can get paid as well, is when people say, your daughters are so lovely to talk with and so on. Other kids just don't say anything, and you're like, actually, we knew we were doing it at the time, but it didn't feel different.
No, we've had it with friends who've got older daughters, and they are allowed this. We don't want to be at the table, and they go off and sit on their own on Snapchat. And it takes a lot for me not just go over and grab the phone and nothing to do with me. If I send to the parents, that's not right.
No.
But I'm not blaming parents here, because I also think there's been a social experiment where people didn't realise, and social media has changed as well. It was this sharing. It was like Facebook and Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat. They're different from Facebook.
Sure.
And they were sharing platforms that we can share your pictures with your friends and with your family, and yes, you got that, but then it got commercialized and it got monetized. And of course, everything you're seeing now, like you brought up earlier, is commercial. I use it. I can't criticize it, in that respect. But my children are certainly not on it, and no. we have to navigate this as parents. We're going to have to navigate AI. That's in its infancy, so we have to make sure that as parents, like teaching our children to cross the road and not go in front of a car or not drink or not smoke, we have to make that judgment and say, okay, look, social media is not good, or we have to put many barriers in. My children have their little thing, and they're on YouTube. They're on YouTube Kids, but the amount of strict, all the things you can change, the controls of what
yes.
they're actually watching, it's all there for parents to be able to do it. It's all connected to my phone. I know what, if anything, what she's watching, how many hours she's been on, or those things. And if anything changes on that phone, Google set it all up. It comes up and it goes. I'm like, Matilda, are you just somehow downloaded? And she went, yeah, there was it pops up.
Yeah.
And what people don't realise at the moment, it's not being said on the news, is that the head of Facebook, Michael, is it Zuckerberg, and the head of Facebook, the head of Instagram, I think it's Instagram, are in a massive court case at the moment. It was also, I think it was Snapchat and TikTok were also in it. They've already settled out of court not to be there. And this is, parents are taking the platforms, social platforms, to court to say, you are trying to get our kids addicted. Explain the addiction. Like, we know from a manifesto of a meeting that you've said, kids are not on, there's not enough screen time for kids, they need to be on it more. And that's what they've said. And the guy from, I believe Instagram, if I'm wrong, I apologize, but from Instagram, he said, it doesn't matter if your kid's on 16 hours a day on Instagram, that doesn't mean you're addicted. Now, imagine the ludicrousy of saying, now, if you do something for 16 hours a day, it doesn't have to be something bad, like drinking, smoking, everything. If you're at the gym for 16 hours a day, you're addicted. If you're, too obsessed with fitness, any of those different things, for 16 hours a day, it's too much. You're addicted to it. And everything I do, going back to sort of keeping fit, everything is in moderation. And by him saying that, you can just see, but no one's talking about this court case in America. No one's ever heard of it, which isn't that unusual? That the social media.
Well, I was just about to say, they're not going to promote it on their social media. Yeah, we get fed
exactly.
what we, and our For You page isn't going to have that. That's you've really good to raise that awareness now. I mean, I know quite a few people in big tech, and it's been fed back to me that Zuckerberg and any of the leaders, if you like, their kids are nowhere near using what they actually put out and use. So they know the fact that that sort of their business, if you like, is not something that they want to have around their own kids. That speaks volumes.
And I think the only sort of backlash I've had from saying it should be banned is people automatically go, well, kids will find a way around it. They'll use VPNs. They'll get on it. And I'm saying, hang on, it's down to you to do it. Yeah. The same with I can go about drinking or smoking. Yes, you know what? You might sneak off when you're 16 and go and have a drink, and it's down to the parents to stop that.
Yeah.
And say you can't be doing that. Yeah. That's all right. It's down to the parents again. But of course, who was also addicted to social media and who's also on their phone? The parents.
Yes.
And
there's an accountability there, isn't there?
Yeah, and I tell people at school, other parents from school, and I said, guys, be very careful about putting your child on. Because a lot of people don't understand that when you put your image or your children's image online, it's not, you don't own it anymore. It can be used for anything. It can be used by AI. And if they come back and they say, you say, that looks really like my child, they go, okay, well, you put it online. It's ours to use. Yeah. I don't think a lot of people quite understand that. So when I say to other parents, be very careful about putting all your kids on, they're like, yeah, we understand. And I said, AI is used for not all good things, not campaigns, it's used for porn, AI porn, everything of scraping imagery. And they go, yeah. And a couple of months, I literally, mums and dads, they're on Instagram. And when I said that, they've literally gone home and posted of their children about what they were doing online. It was a brilliant campaign when, I don't know if you saw on TV recently, where there was two parents and their child going up an escalator in the shopping. And the two people are going, well, how was football last week? Did your dad forget to pick you up again? And these parents are going, what are you talking about? And then they were walking around going, did you get that dress you were really bugging your mum? Your mum said she couldn't have. And because their whole life was on social media and they knew all about their children. And that to me it was a brilliant advert. And I hopefully got to a few people to go, yes, why am I posting? What's the point?
Yeah.
I understand if you've got a closed Instagram or TikTok account and only your friends and family can see it. Fine, I totally.
People that have got a genuine interest in
that.
No, I get that.
What are you putting out to the general public for? Yeah. Really, at the end of the day,
brings it back to social media really being, in any way, probably being encouraged to be used as a force for good, if you like. But I want to bring it back to you, and I'm conscious of sort of rounding out. You mentioned the M&S shoot, and I think there's a really nice story here that you can explain. But there's a real longevity piece to you that feels like at any one time you're just going to be, working till the sort of day you die, if you like. But just bring about how the M&S.
So M&S came about. We had it was 2012, 2013 when we knew we wanted to do a collaboration, and I had a few offers from other brands, and I was shooting for M&S. They brought me in to do Collezione, which was their brilliant Italian brand, and then conversation started about doing something collaborative in the way that Rosie had done the female side, and a lot of people at the time were like, M&S, because now M&S is probably very different. Even within the last year and the last 6 months, the way people are perceiving M&S. But during that time, people were like, yeah, we like M&S, but M&S, Dolce M&S. I was like, I love M&S. I've been going to M&S with my mum since I was, it's a British institution. I have, so much love for M&S and what it stood for. And it was genuine. As soon as I went, yeah, that's a genuine thing. I would love to help M&S. I'd love to help their side, of course, helping myself. It was a great opportunity. So that's when we started David Gandy for Autograph, and a small team, and it proved very popular. And most collaborations finished probably after 2 years. John mine went on for 6. We did over 90 million quid's worth of sales. It was a long time to be with M&S. There was 7 years, 8 years in total, I think. And M&S has changed and the whole team's changed there. So I went out and started David Gandy Worldwear, pretty much doing what I was doing Autograph, different narrative, but doing it myself. But there was always this inkling of, it was the customers still, the old customers from M&S still going, we can't get your t-shirts, we can't get your charms. And I say, well, look, we're on, with David Gandy Worldwear. They're there, they're the same, they're even better. But you didn't have the force of M&S. 26 million customers. We're a tiny little company, Worldwear. So in my thoughts, and we had a lot of big other shops, department stores wanting David Gandy Worldwear, and then I started speaking to Stuart, at the new CEO of M&S, and he said, I think how about we sort of go full circle and we do something with Worldwear, and you come back. I've got Jaeger. I want you to, we talked about earlier, I would like you to help with Jaeger. We want to help with Worldwear. We know the past, so why don't we build on that? And I suppose within a year of starting Worldwear, I always sort of manifested in my head, I was like, we need to be back in M&S.
It's a great story. It brings the entrepreneurial element and visualization, which has been a key part of this conversation, actually.
Yeah, I think visualization is
and I like the fact that you at any one time early in your career were doing what brands wanted you to do, whereas you've been able to, again, entrepreneurially bring in what works for you, and then bring in who you want to actually work with.
I think you have to know, that's important, is to know your limitations as well as things your advantages or what you bring a brand. A brand's approached me, and I said, guys, look, listen, I'm already a fan of what you do. I'm in your clothing. Don't pay me. You don't need to, because I'm in it. I'm a fan of the brand. If you want to do something, that would be lovely, and it's very genuine. As other brands, I would say it just doesn't suit my, what I stand for. I mean, I was always kind of into, there was a wellness and fitness element with Vitabiotics and Techno Gym, and I was talking about training all the time. This is what people were interested. And we had fizzy drinks and ice creams and all these offers. I said, I can't genuinely be seen to be doing fizzy drinks and ice creams. And then on the fitness side, especially, this is aiming towards children. So I need to hold myself to a certain standard, and not just taking the money to do that. And that's what I've kind of always done. I mean, it felt very at home. I walked back into M&S after a 5-year absence, and the first person who came and went, "Hi, Mr. Gandy, good to have you back."
Oh, I love that. There's a James Bond element to that. I love that.
Thank you. That's got a bit emotional about it. When I was in there, I was like, "Thank you so much." And because there's a little, there's a little apprehension about going back. And I never sometimes like to go back, but I feel like there was unfinished business.
Yeah, but you visualised it in the right way. Yeah. It wasn't like you were not achieving something to then go back, which is a different feeling. You actually were like, "This feels right. This is what I'd like to do," and it's come together.
Yeah.
And on that, I ask everybody when I get to sit with them to have a conversation like this, what your definition of success is. What does it look like to you?
Well, I think in the modern world, as you said, the definition of success earlier is the watch, the Lamborghini, that side people's idea of what success looks like, and that's never has been to me. Something success to me that is I don't know whether I can even answer that question. I've controlled what I wanted to do. Now, a lot of people might say that might have a problem with authority and being told what to do, and I don't particularly like that. But it's pretty much I've done it my way, the way I've wanted to do, and I've stood for what I've stood up for what I believe in, and I'm still doing that with the social media, with the Lost Boys. And there's a side to that. Paul Newman always said, "Show me a man without enemies, and I'll show you a man without character." The easy way is not to stand up for something, is not to have pride in what you believe in, and I've always done that. So if you ask me to success, what's the most success? I said I've done it. I've done what I want to do, and I've done it my way, and I've always sort of stood by that and had the determination to not follow the crowd and do it by myself.
Love that. And I think that's been a parallel right the way through this conversation. And I want to thank you at this point as well, because you choose what you do. And when I reached out to you, and we obviously had a chance to meet when we were at the CSJ event, and then I subsequently emailed you and so on, I thought, I really hope David does say yes to this, because it's a heartfelt desire to have this chat with you. But also it's for you to decide whether you want to or not, and obviously aligned. And so thank you. I hope you've enjoyed talking to me.
I did, sir. Much appreciated.
Thank you. Cheers.